Arizona Territory, 1883, the sky was red as a branding iron when Virginia Whitlow walked into the little church in the middle of Dust Creek, clutching a bundle of muslin and lace she had sewn herself by candlelight. She had never worn anything so white. Her heart pounded behind her ribs louder than the cicadas outside. The church was full, not because folks loved her. They came because they loved a good laugh. Word had spread like fire through dry grass. That Whitlow girl's gone and made her own wedding dress. Looks like something stitched from curtains and pride. She heard the snickers before she even stepped inside. Virginia stood in the open doorway, sunlight behind her, the thin veil catching the breeze. She had made every stitch with her own hands, no frills, no corset. Just what she could manage with a needle, scraps, and a prayer. She had no mother to help her. No sisters, no aunts, just two little brothers waiting back at the tiny house she had kept standing since Pa died and Ma ran off. She tried to hold her head high, but the murmurs hit her like stones. Looks like a ghost from a bad dream. Did she use flour sacks for sleeves? Virginia's fingers tightened around her bouquet of dried lavender and wild oats. Then she saw him. Travis Vaughn stood at the front, broad shoulders under a clean, pressed shirt, brown hair combed back. He turned when the door opened, and the minute he saw her, he smiled like the sun just rose for him alone. He took 2 steps forward, shaking his head gently, like he could not believe what he was seeing. And then he said it, loud enough for every voice to hush. "You look like everything I prayed for." The room went still. Virginia blinked at him, her throat tight. Travis reached out his hand. She walked toward him, her chin lifting just enough to meet his eyes. He had always been kind. Ever since that first day 3 years ago when he rode into town with nothing but a saddlebag and a horse too tired to buck. Folks called him a drifter, but he found work on her neighbor's ranch, then started fixing fences for the widow downriver. He never looked at her like she was just an orphan girl with 2 brothers and no future. Now he looked at her like she was the only thing he wanted. They said their vows with quiet voices, hands clasped. And when the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Travis leaned in like he had all the time in the world. The church emptied fast after that. Some folks looked away, pretending to be polite. Others whispered behind their hands, but none of it mattered. Later that evening, Virginia sat beside Travis on the porch of their small new house, the one he had built with his own hands on a patch of land he bought outside town, just for them. She had not even known he was saving for it. "You meant what you said?" she asked, her voice soft. He looked over at her, one arm around her shoulders. "Every word. I have been praying for you since the first time I saw you chasing that wild chicken through the street with your hair all tangled." Virginia laughed, leaning into him. "I was trying to feed my brothers." "I know," he said. "And I knew then you were stronger than any woman I'd ever met." Inside, little Zachary and Zane, twins, 5 years old, were asleep in their new room. Travis had built their beds himself. "You do not have to stay," she said, though her voice trembled. "I know this is not the life most men want." Travis turned her face toward his gently. "Virginia Whitlow, I did not marry you because I felt sorry for you. I married you because I love you. You're everything I ever wanted, and those boys. They are mine now, too." She blinked fast, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They already call you Pa," he kissed her forehead. "Good, then it is settled." The wind picked up, warm and dry, rustling the wildflowers growing near the steps. Virginia closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt safe. The laughter from earlier faded out of her memory like dust blown off a trail. What mattered now was this moment, the porch, the stars blinking to life, the steady warmth of the man beside her who saw not the dress, not the town's scorn, but her. Her exactly as she was, and he loved her. Tomorrow would bring chores and bills and little boys who needed breakfast. But tonight was hers and Travis's. And Virginia knew deep down, in the place where her fears had lived for too long, she would never be alone again. The ground behind the house was still rough, scattered with mesquite stumps and the dry bones of past summers, but Travis had started a garden plot anyway. He turned the earth before dawn, before the sun could scald his neck, and Virginia watched from the window with a quiet ache in her chest. No one had ever worked for her before, not without expecting something in return. She stepped outside with a tin cup of water, her boots catching on a root he hadn't dug up yet. He was kneeling with his sleeves rolled, dirt clinging to his arms. "I boiled the well water so it's clean," she said, holding the cup out. He took it without rising, drinking slow, then handed it back. "I was thinking we could try onions first. They're hard to kill, and I heard they keep bugs off other things." Virginia crouched beside him, brushing a beetle off a flat stone. "I read that too once. Mama had a book of kitchen wisdom. She used to sleep with onions in her socks when she caught cold." He glanced over, waiting. "She said the smell scared the sickness out of her." Virginia smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She liked old remedies, thought people in town were fools for buying tonics in green bottles. Travis let the silence settle between them before he spoke again. "You think she'll ever come back?" Virginia shook her head. "She's been gone 4 years. Took her sewing kit and Pa's silver comb. If she meant to return, she would have done it by now." He nodded, respectful. "I won't ask again." They worked side by side for a while, hands in the dirt. When the sun climbed higher, Virginia stood and brushed her skirt. "I told the boys to stay inside till I checked the rocks for scorpions. I already cleared the ones near the porch, but I'll do the rest after supper." She paused. "They like you, you know." "Zachary tries to walk like you when he thinks I'm not looking." Travis chuckled under his breath. "He'll hurt his back if he starts copying me too soon." Virginia shaded her eyes with her hand. "They've never had anyone steady like this. You say something and then you do it." "They notice." He leaned back on his heels. "They deserve that, so do you." Later that evening, with the boys leaning over a tin washtub in the yard catching frogs in the shallow water runoff, Virginia lit a lamp inside and opened the trunk at the foot of the bed. She pulled out a folded square of pale blue calico fabric she'd hidden away for years, waiting for something worth making. When Travis came in, shaking dust from his hat, she held it up. "I want to make curtains," she said. "For the boys' room. It's not much, but it's cheerful. I thought maybe they'd sleep easier if the moonlight didn't spill so bright across their pillows." He stepped closer, running his hand over the cloth. "That's a good idea." She looked up at him. "I never thought I'd have someone to show it to." He set his hat on the peg and touched her face lightly. "You don't have to keep waiting, Virginia. You're here now, with me." She swallowed hard. "I keep expecting it to fall apart. It won't." She wanted to believe him. That night, after the boys were asleep and the wind had calmed, they sat at the table with a single candle burning low. He slid a small, hand-carved box across to her. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside was a thimble he'd carved from mesquite wood, smooth and small, with her initials etched on the side. "I noticed you don't have one," he said. "Figured your fingers could use the help." Virginia stared down at it, throat tight. She'd pricked herself more times than she could count, but she never thought to complain. "I'll use it," she said softly. He reached for her hand. "I want to build this life right, not just the house or the land, but with you." She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. Outside, the frogs croaked low in the dark, and the stars blinked steady above the roof. Inside, with her fingers curled around the little wooden thimble, Virginia felt something new settle in her chest. Not just safety, not just love, it was the quiet certainty of being chosen. The rains came late that year. Not a storm, not even enough to fill the creek behind the cottonwood stand, but a slow, steady drizzle that softened the dust and brought a hush over the land. Virginia stepped outside with a basket of linens and paused under the eaves, watching the sky blur into the hills. Travis had taken the wagon into town, trading fence wire for flour and tobacco. He wouldn't be back till near sundown. Zachary and Zane were inside with a stack of carved cedar blocks, building a fort on the hearth rug. She could hear them murmuring to each other, voices low and serious the way children got when they believed they were alone. She hung the linens under the porch, careful with the clothespins. The air smelled like wet mesquite and old earth. Across the yard, the young peach tree they'd planted in spring was bending gently, its roots still shallow but holding behind her. The screen door creaked open. "A letter came," called Mrs. Farnsworth, the ranch widow from 3 parcels over. She held an envelope out beneath her shawl. "Your fella passed it to me on his way out, said you'd want it right off." Virginia wiped her hands on her apron, stepping down to take it. "Much obliged." Mrs. Farnsworth lingered, peering past her into the house. "Boys seem content." "They are." "I see to it." The older woman's eyes softened. "You always did. I remember when you'd come fetch kindling from the riverbed, dragging that broken crate behind you. Wouldn't let nobody help." Virginia folded the envelope once, then again. "I didn't know how to ask." "You don't have to anymore." Mrs. Farnsworth tipped her head toward the porch. "He's a good one, that man of yours. Most men wouldn't look twice at a woman carrying as much as you were." Virginia didn't answer. She only nodded, and the widow understood. She tapped her cane twice on the bottom step and wandered off the way she'd come. Inside, Virginia lit the lamp and sat at the table. The letter was from her uncle in Prescott, the one who'd fought in the war and never married. His handwriting was as sharp and straight as the bayonet he once carried. She read the first lines twice, slower the second time. He was offering to take the boys for the summer. Said a change of scene might do them good, and there were chores enough on his land to keep two lively boys worn down by nightfall. She folded the letter, set it aside, and stood looking out the window. The boys were still playing, now arguing quietly about whose block belonged where. When Travis returned, the wagon wheels crunching through the damp, she met him at the side of the house. His hat was tilted low, the horses damp with sweat. "You look like you've been riding through soup," she said. "Felt like it." He handed down the flour sack first, then the tobacco tin. "Store's run by that new fellow from Yuma now. Charges 2 cents more on everything." "I'll stretch what we've got." Travis touched her arm lightly. "You always do." They unloaded in easy silence, working side by side until the wagon was empty and the supplies stowed. Later, once the boys were in bed and the fire burned low, Virginia showed him the letter. "They've never been away from me," she said. "Not for more than a day." He read it through, then set it down. "You trust him. He's my father's brother. Never raised a hand to anyone, far as I know." Travis leaned back in the chair, rubbing his jaw. "It'd give us time." Virginia met his eyes. "For what?" He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "To build something that's ours. Not just borrowed from what came before." She didn't speak, but her fingers curled around his. "There's an old barn behind the property line," he said. "Needs a roof. I thought we could clear it out, make it into something. What kind of something? Don't know yet. But I want us to build it together." Virginia looked toward the window. The rain had stopped. The moon was rising, pale and full. She turned back to him. "Then we'll send them, just for the summer." Travis nodded once. "We'll ride up together. Make sure it's what you want." She didn't say thank you. She just stood, moved around the table, and rested her head against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her without speaking. The fire crackled softly behind them. For the first time in her life, Virginia felt the future open wide before her, not as a burden, but as a field waiting to be planted. And she would not have to plant it alone. The ride north to Prescott took 5 days. Travis drove the wagon along the flatter ridges where the trail stayed dry, while Virginia sat beside him with the boys tucked under a wool blanket in the back. The road wound through dry hills and juniper stands, the air thinner with each mile. They stopped at creeks to let the mules drink, and at night, Travis pitched the canvas lean-to while Virginia warmed beans over the fire and checked the boys' boots for blisters. On the third night, after Zachary fell asleep halfway through a story about a coyote that could talk, Travis leaned back on his elbows beside the fire, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "You ever think about learning to read music?" he asked, voice low. Virginia looked up from packing the boys' shirts tighter in the satchel. "Music? I heard a man in town, Mr. Kessler, owns the feed stable he's sending for a pump organ for his wife. Says she can play anything if you give her the notes. Got me wondering if you'd ever want to learn something like that. You hum sometimes when you hang clothes." She hesitated. "I used to when I was little. Mama said I had the pitch, but there was never time for lessons or anyone to teach me. There's a schoolhouse near town. I could ask the teacher if she knows someone who gives instruction." Virginia folded the last shirt into the bag. "You do that," he shrugged like it cost him nothing. "I'd do anything that puts light in your eyes." She didn't answer, but the next morning, when she saw him brushing dust off the boys' shoulders before they climbed into the wagon, she felt something warm settle low in her chest. At her uncle's homestead, the boys ran straight for the chicken coop before the wagon even stopped. The old man stood near the porch, leaning on a cane that looked carved from ironwood. He touched his hat when he saw Virginia, and when she stepped down, he gave her a nod and said, "Looks like they'll do fine here." She watched as the boys chased a speckled hen between two barrels. "They've never had space like this. They'll work, I'll see to that." "But I'll feed them right too." Travis stepped forward, offering his hand. "We'll pick them up come August if that suits." The old man shook once, firm. "Suits me." They stayed the night in the back room, and the next morning Virginia kissed her brothers goodbye without letting her voice waver. The youngest clung for a moment, then ran off after a rooster with a stick in hand. The wagon rolled quiet for a while on the return. The absence of small voices left a hollow kind of calm. Virginia didn't speak until they passed the split oak near the ridgeline. "I don't think I've been without them for more than a day since Pa died." Travis kept one hand steady on the reins. "You'll hear from them. I'll ride in to collect letters every week," she nodded. "I know they're safe, it just feels strange." "Sometimes peace feels like that," he said. "Like something you've forgotten how to carry." Back home, the house was still. The air inside held the smell of straw and lye soap, but no scattered toys or boot scuffs on the floor. Virginia moved quieter than usual that first evening, setting 2 plates instead of 4, folding the unused napkins with care. After supper, Travis took a lantern and led her out past the back fence. The barn stood crooked and gray in the falling light, its roof half sagged, the floor cluttered with old harness straps and broken crates. "I've been thinking," he said, holding the lantern high. "We could clear this out and lay down new boards, make a workroom. You'd have space to sew without fighting supper smells or little feet underfoot." Virginia stepped through the doorway, trailing her fingers along the split wood. "And you, I'll build a bench for leatherwork, maybe take commissions from town. That way we both earn and stay near home." She turned toward him. "You already work enough. I want more than a roof and meals. I want a life we make with our hands." She touched the door frame, then looked at him. "I'll help you strip the nails from the beams. We can plane what we can save." He smiled, small and tired and real. "That's all I hoped you'd say." They spent the next week clearing the barn. She tied back her hair and wore his old shirt over her dress to keep splinters from catching. He showed her how to use the pry bar without jerking her shoulder, and she taught him how to sort cloth by grain for patching sacks. They worked until dusk most days, stopping only when the sky turned pink and the lanterns ran low. One evening, after they'd laid the first new floorboard, she sat on the edge of the foundation with her arms draped over her knees. "My hands ache," she murmured. Travis sat beside her, brushing sawdust from her sleeve. "You're earning something with them." She turned to him, and he caught her gaze like it was something he'd waited to hold all day. "No one's ever built anything for me before," she said. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch slow and sure. "You don't have to say that again. I already heard it the first time." She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder, and they sat like that while the last of the light slipped behind the hills. Inside, the house stood waiting. But out here in this quiet place they were shaping together, Virginia felt something shift. Not just the ache of missing the boys, not just the satisfaction of labor. It was a beginning shy and steady and true. The last of the barn's roof was finished by mid-June. Travis had salvaged tin from a collapsed shed up the ridge, and Virginia helped flatten the edges with a mallet until her arms pulsed. By the time they drove the final nail, the sun was high and merciless, and both of them leaned against the frame, panting through laughter, soaked through and proud. They didn't speak much that day, but something settled in the quiet between them like the land itself had taken notice. That evening, Virginia filled a basin with cool water and sat on the back steps, soaking her hands. Travis brought out a small bundle wrapped in cloth and placed it beside her without a word. Inside were 3 spools of dyed thread indigo, rust red, and a pale gold that glinted like wheat in sunlight. She ran her thumb across the fibers. "Where'd you come by these?" Old trader passed through the general store while I was picking up nails. Said they came from San Antonio. I asked if he had anything strong enough for canvas and light enough for calico. "I've never worked with colors like these." He sat beside her, pulling off his boots. "Thought maybe you'd want to make something that wasn't just for mending." Virginia dipped her cloth in the water again, the threads resting in her lap. "I'd like that." A breeze moved across the yard and the peach tree's leaves trembled. She looked over at him, studying the dust in his hair, the way his shirt stuck at the collar. "You ever miss your old life?" she asked. "Before Dust Creek," he tilted his head. "What makes you ask? Because you never talk about where you came from. Or who you left behind." Travis didn't answer right away. He reached down, lifted a small stone from the step, and tossed it into the yard. "My brother died in Kansas. We were supposed to head west together, start fresh, but he took sick outside Dodge. I buried him myself." Virginia's hand stilled in the basin. "I kept moving after that, never stayed long, worked where I could, didn't talk much. It was easier that way." She set the cloth aside and turned to face him fully. "Why'd you stop here?" "Because you were standing in the street with a garden hoe in both hands, telling a grown man twice your size to keep his mule off your onions." Virginia blinked, then let out a quiet laugh. "He was trampling everything. I'd never seen someone so fierce over a patch of dirt. I was tired. I thought you were brave." She looked down at her hands, fingers wrinkled from the water. "I was scared. Me too." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't press or pry, until the lantern inside flickered low. Travis stood and offered his hand. "Come on, let's rest these bones." They slept side by side that night, not touching, but close enough for warmth to pass between them. By July, the boys had sent 2 letters. Zane wrote about a stray dog they were feeding scraps to, and Zachary drew a picture of a wagon with 6 wheels and a chimney. Virginia pinned them to the inside of the barn, above the workbench Travis had built. Every morning, she read the lines again before threading her needle. One morning, as she was sketching a pattern for a new dress, commission her 3rd this month, Travis came in with a folded paper. "Sheriff's looking for someone to take over the mail, run out to the ranches near Dry Fork," he said. "3 days a week, light work, pays steady. You thinking of taking it?" "I was thinking we could take it together. Ride out, drop the bundles, maybe bring back things folks need. We could make something of it. Honest work, but it'd keep us around." She set the pencil down. "I like that idea." He nodded, then crossed the room and rested his hand at the small of her back. "There's something else." She turned to face him. "I want to file a formal claim on this land, make it legal, put both our names on it." Virginia's throat tightened. "You don't have to do that for me. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for us. We built this, we live here, you and me, and I wanted to say that, clear as anything." She searched his face, and what she saw there wasn't obligation or charity or even hope. It was love, plain and steady. She stepped forward, laying her palm over his chest. "Then let's do it." That afternoon, they rode into town. The clerk at the land office raised his eyebrows when they signed beside each other, but he didn't say a word. When they stepped back into the sun, Virginia held Travis's hand tight. They stopped at the mercantile before leaving, and Travis slid a coin across the counter, asking for one of the slate writing boards hanging in the back. He passed it to her without fanfare. "So you can sketch your patterns cleaner," he said. She traced the edge with her thumb. "You think of everything?" "I think of you," he said. That night they sat on the porch, the stars sharp above them. No fire, no chores waiting, just the sound of crickets and wind through the brush. "Do you think the boys will like the barn?" she asked. "They'll love it. Especially the loft. I was thinking we could build a little desk under the window for Zachary's drawings. I'd like that. And maybe a rail for Zane to hang his knapsack." He looked at her, his voice low. "You're planning out the years, aren't you?" She leaned against him. "I think I am." He kissed her then, not quick, not hesitant, just long enough to say everything they hadn't yet put into words. They stayed like that until the chill crept in and the coyotes called from the ridge. In the months that followed, the boys returned with sunburnt cheeks and stories of wild goats and hay rides. They took to the barn like it had been waiting for them all along. Virginia opened a small sewing service, taking in work from town and the outlying ranches. Travis ran the mail route, and on days she went with him, they packed biscuits and dried peaches and stopped by the creek to let the horses drink. They never spoke of what might come next. There was no need. They had a roof, a home, and 4 hands between them that never stopped building. And every time Virginia looked at Travis, whether bent over a saddle strap or brushing the dust from Zane's cap, she saw the same thing: a man who chose her, a life they made together. And nothing, not dust nor drought nor time, would ever steal that from them.